It started with a successful man named Borges. One day, Borges visited a barber shop owned by George, his regular customer, who was simple but friendly. In the midst of a warm conversation, George hopefully offered his son, Ignatius, to be taken by Borges to the city, hoping that Ignatius would find a better way of life. Without much consideration, Borges finally agreed to the request, so they left the quiet village for the hustle and bustle of the city, which was full of promises and perhaps also traps along the way. Borges reminded Ignatius that this opportunity was a door that not everyone could knock on. He hoped in a firm tone, but with a hint of hope that Ignatius would not waste the golden opportunity that was now in his grasp. When he arrived at Borges' house, he introduced Ignatius to his wife, Savarina, but the truth was not completely present. Borges lied, calling Ignatius the nephew of his brother in the village. Savarina accepted without suspicion, then gently prepared a room for the young guest. After the room was tidy and quiet, Savarina gave Ignatius a book, a subtle hint that he would fill his time with reading, perhaps also as a window to self-understanding. The next morning, before leaving for work, Borges advised Ignatius again. He said repeatedly, but the terms of meaning about professionalism, sincerity, and commitment to the values that are the pillars in a harsh world. He then accompanied Ignatius to fill out various forms as the first step into the world of work. In the afternoon, they returned home after a silent dinner. Ignatius entered his room there. In the slowly creeping silence, he opened the book given by Savarina. But between the pages of words, imagination began to blossom, wild and uncontrollable in his daydreams. Ignatius saw Savarina dancing in front. Of him, her movements were soft and alluring, as if bringing time to a stop for a moment. The dance was not just a shadow, it was an incarnation that blurred the boundaries between real and imaginary, until without realizing it, the daydream was brought to the workplace, enveloping his consciousness. Borges also began to realize the change. Ignatius's lack of seriousness at work became embers that slowly grew until one night at the dining table, which should have been a warm space, Borges' anger finally exploded loudly, like lightning that broke the silence. Borges' explosion of anger at the dining table became the first crack that disturbed Savarina's inner peace. After that, Savarina returned to Bass. The room with restrained steps staring at her reflection in the mirror, as if reluctant to witness again the echo of anger that still hung in her mind, especially when Ignatius became the target of reprimand. The strange feeling grew silently. He led Savarina to walk slowly to the front of the room. Ignatius stood in silence, observing from the gap, seeing the young man immersed in the book he had given him, as if every page held an unspoken secret. The next morning the routine returned. Borges and Ignatius went to work as usual. But Ignatius's daydreams crept back in uninvited, his gaze fixed on a female staff member in front of him, who slowly changed into the figure of Savarina in the shadows of his mind. Night fell, in deep sleep. Ignatius was carried away into a dream that felt so real. He saw Savarina with him, so close, as if the dream bridged two separate consciousnesses. At the same time, Savarina suddenly woke up from her sleep, shocked, as if something invisible had just touched her soul. The next morning, Borges decided not to bring Ignatius to the office. He suggested that the young man take a break from the routine that was starting to falter. Ignatius returned to his room, reached for the book once again, but the words in it instead lulled him into a deep sleep. On the other hand, Savarina was overcome with anxiety that never subsided. There was a subtle but strong push that made him walk slowly towards Ignatius's room. Meanwhile, in his dream, Ignatius saw Savarina again, this time getting closer and closer. And in the real world, Savarina did the same thing. Approaching Ignatius, who was fast asleep, a vague feeling between doubt and undefined enthusiasm led him closer, thinning the boundary between dream and reality. After that, Savarina immediately returned to her room. She was silent for a long time, as if just realizing the footsteps she had taken, a feeling that she did not fully understand but had already happened not long after. Borges went home with slow steps. He walked through every corner of the house as if looking for something invisible. He entered the room and found Savarina fast asleep, her face calm, but keeping a secret. Borges then turned to observe Ignatius, who was also sleeping in his room, quiet, but somehow felt strange. From his point of view, doubts grew. That slowly hardened Borges began to feel that Ignatius was no longer the right figure to be present in the midst of his family until the next morning. The decision was born firmly, and, inevitably, he decided to return Ignatius to his father. Even so, he still suggested that Ignatius continue his work, but no longer live with them when he was about to leave. Ignatius had time to look back. His gaze was fixed on the window of the house, hoping to see Savarina one last time, just a shadow or maybe a greeting that was not said. But Borges immediately limited the steps, saying that Savarina was sick and could not be disturbed on the other side of time. As if walking in silence, Savarina seemed to tidy up the room that Ignatius had previously occupied, rearranging the sheets, tidying up small objects, as if erasing traces that had ever existed. A subtle signal that the room would return to its original state, ready to receive another guest without leaving a story. The film ended in emotion. That slowly moved away. Ignatius looked once again, his eyes holding hopes that were not answered. The car continued to drive, carrying. He was heading towards a separation that might never be reunited, but behind it all, there was a smile on Ignatius's face, light but sincere, as if he had found something within himself, a feeling that might never be truly real, but enough to live in his memory as a dream that he secretly had.